Tonight, understanding our differences.
We do see color. We do see people are different.
Growing as a community.
I don't think it's any one person's responsibility.
There's still racial inequalities in this world, in this country, that we need to fix.
Talk about it, like, be respectful.
And healing.
People get tired of all the talk, but we've got to talk about it. We've got to reimagine and recreate together.
All starts with the uncomfortable conversation.
I'm Yuna Lee. Thank you so much for joining us for our Project Community Special.
And I'm Ife Bosimba. Tonight, we're focusing on the uncomfortable conversation about race and racism. Now, we understand these are tough topics, so we've spoken with counselors, families, and advocates as they share some really great advice.
That can help us all grow as one big community. And here's what we hope you take away: understanding racism, how to talk about race and racism, and how we can move forward and be united rather than divided.
Now, before we can talk about racism, we must first understand what it is. According to Merriam-Webster, it's a belief a human's traits and capacities make them better than another race. Northwest Arkansas NAACP Chapter President Monique Jones believes that we must all play our part to bring racism to an end and review systems that keep racism in place.
I don't think it's any one person's responsibility to resolve the whole issue of systematic racism within the jobs, within the schools, within even our political system, policing. There should be a level of accountability to everyone that somebody else should have to answer up when we see that systematic racism is actually overtaking a particular race or color or creed and just holding them down.
Jones believes that once you have an understanding of what racism is, that will help you talk about it.
In order to get comfortable, you have to start talking at home. I spoke with a family who has had conversations all along.
Edward and Vanessa Parrish live in Rogers. Their two daughters are 3 and 8 years old. And for the Parrish family, conversations about race started early.
Obviously, they can see the differences between their mom and their dad. And they see the difference between them and their friends, and just embracing those things, not to talk about not seeing color. We do see color. We do see people are different.
Vanessa tells us she had to learn about her husband's culture, experiences to really understand how to talk to her kids.
Yeah, I think that was something I more had to prepare myself for than he had to prepare himself for, because he's had things said to him. He's been through more things than I have when it comes to what you look like. I think that though that starts with a conversation with them, with how you also prepare yourself. It kind of goes hand in hand.
And the recent climate has changed the way Vanessa thinks about race.
And I will tell you, as a white woman living in Northwest Arkansas, I had no idea of all of the things that history entailed, because we weren't taught that. And so our conversations have been, I want to know the facts. I want to know what happened. I want to know what's changing. I want to know what needs to be changed.
And although it's challenging, they say they talk about love and kindness when talking about race.
Explain that some people go through different things, and it may cause them to want to act a certain way, but at our house, we're kind and we love people. And sometimes when people are mean, that just means that they may not have somebody that loves them.
Being a biracial family, Edward says there's a lot of learning and a lot of conversation between everyone.
I mean, the thing is that we're both different. I think the advantage is that we were able to grow up in different climates.
I've really had to open my eyes and learn a lot about the other side, learn a lot about the different aspects of people that are not white and how they are treated. Now it's very important for me to have those conversations with them and say, you are half white. Yes, you are. But just because you are half white, you treat everyone as individuals.
Both parishes say they believe starting as early as possible has worked better for them.
Having a natural racist tendency, that's something that's learned and something that's taught. Teach our kids, yes, see people's color, see people's differences, see all of this, but accept it and love it and honor it and embrace it and celebrate it.
The parishes hope their talks with their children help make a difference.
We spoke with a licensed therapist on how to talk to your kids about this issue. Twyla Ronak works for Four Rivers Counseling.
I really think the earlier you talk with kids and and tell them about how other people react, the better. Kids need to know hard things, not to protect them, but to let them know it exists and what to do and how to talk to adults about it, and know that they can go out of their way and be kind and appreciate people despite their differences. If we live in a sheltered world, we don't know and turn a blind eye to the sufferings of others. Whereas if we can see the suffering, then we can increase empathy and understanding instead of seeing us versus them. We're all people.
She also says when you're talking with your children, just meet them where they are.
I would say most of the kids are already a little bit aware and uncertain anyway. So I would encourage parents to maybe buy some books that have different races of people in them and start to talk about just how we all look different.
Twyla also recommends when your child is watching TV and you see a teachable moment, just pause it and ask them about what they think, about what they saw, and let your child lead the conversation. She says teaching your child about race and racism is the same as some other uncomfortable topics.
Well, 2 women from Northwest Arkansas co-wrote a book about race in America. 4029's Lydia Fielder talked to them about the importance of seeing color.
Angela Courage Malott and LaTanya Jackson have been friends for nearly 20 years, and 20% of that friendship has been spent writing a book together, focused on overcoming racism in both daily life and the corporate world. They say that's still in 2020.
Systemic racism is very prevalent in corporate America. It shows up very differently in a corporate environment than it does outside of the corporate environment, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
And that racism isn't always so blunt.
It's not someone's knee on your neck like George Floyd, but it definitely is someone's knee on your career. And you can't grow. You're not getting the coaching, you're not getting the opportunities, you're not getting the exposure to executive leadership.
They say racism can't end in the workplace until it ends individually, and that starts with self-education.
Don't ask your black friends to do all the work for you and educate you, because they're already exhausted. They're grieving. We should be grieving with them instead of taxing them to work to help catch us up on the things they've been trying to tell us for years.
I had to go through the education process myself. Just because a person is of color doesn't mean that they understand what the movement is. They also have to go through education. It's not a one-sided perspective. It is a perspective that says, I'm willing to learn and growth comes with being uncomfortable, period.
And being uncomfortable together.
Yes.
Lydia Fielder, 4029 News.
The University of Arkansas system working to address racial inequalities on campus. The U of A system created a racial equity task force. 14 members, including interim provost of the Fayetteville campus, Charles Robinson, will address racial injustice and promote equality. One member of the task force says this group was put together to make sure everyone knows they're included.
We're the ones who are going to make that difference. Educational institutions are going to make that difference. I mean, people just know what they learn, but they can learn more if we're open and honest and inclusive. And in the classroom, those students are going to learn from one another.
The task force will meet monthly.
University of Arkansas Fort Smith students and alumni calling for more to be done about racism on campus. They shared experiences in hopes the conversation would spark change. Chancellor Teresa Riley, who's also a part of the Racial Equity Task Force, says it's important to listen.
We've actually had a couple of great conversations with our Black Student Association and a number of people in our community and at the university who are very supportive of Black Lives Matter. But to be honest, our Black students have taken such an amazing role.
Last year, the university set up its own diversity task force after a former UAFS basketball player accused a former coach of making a racially insensitive remark about his hair.
Well, coming up later in the special, we'll hear from the executive director of the university's Ideals Institute, Alicia Smith, Washington County Sheriff Tim Helder, and DeAndre Jones from Fayetteville's African American Advisory Council on how our conversations can drive change in our community.
A local barbershop owner inspired by a client to make a change.
What happens in the barbershop usually stays in the barbershop. Other people needed to hear it.
How normal barbershop talk led to a community discussion about racial inequality.
Welcome back to our Project Community Special. A Springdale Barbershop held an open roundtable discussion to talk about racism and inequality.
4029's Emma Claybrook joins us with more on what they talked about.
We get so many different stories, and people kind of come in and just pour it out on the barber, like where they're safe. They're safe ears, safe whatever, and so it makes me feel good to be able to be trusted with people's emotions. I think it's my opportunity to be able to share the platform.
Police officers, pastors, barbers, attorneys, and other citizens from around the area gathered for the Let's Chop It Up conversation. It was an open dialogue for everyone to share their experiences and learn from each other.
It's one thing to have the world that I've lived in my whole life and the experiences that I have, and I have my perception of reality based on that. And now you have this input from someone else who's lived a different life, that's been in different places, experienced different things with law enforcement specifically even, and how can I apply that to how I do my job and do it better?
Sharing snippets of their lives, the group was able to have an uncomfortable conversation in the comfort of a familiar setting.
A real conversation and an honest conversation. You need individuals for all different types of background, career, no matter where they're from, their ethnicity. To have a real conversation, I think you need those groups at the table because everybody has a voice. They live in the community just like we do, and having those voices at the table can actually promote change.
Sitting in the same chairs where they get their hair cut, the different voices came together to talk about racism, inequality, and policing in the climate we are living in.
We just felt that what happens in the barbershop usually stays in the barbershop. Other people needed to hear it.
That was 4029's Emma Claybrook reporting. Let's Chop It Up was only supposed to last for an hour, but the group was chatting for almost 2.5 hours. The owner says it's important to continue to have these conversations, so he's planning to host another discussion next month.
The Fayetteville Public Library helping the community understand the Black Lives Matter movement. Diana Dominguez with the library says they wanted to provide more than just resources on the issue.
We understand that the Black community isn't a monolithic community and also might have difference of opinions when it comes to the movement itself.
We need accomplices to come together and support us so that our lives aren't being targeted and aren't being put in jeopardy anymore.
The library hosted a panel that brought together a range of voices, each with different experiences to answer those tough questions.
7 local pastors met to discuss how the church can respond to racism and help heal. Pastor Curtis Smith hosted the roundtable conversation at the historic St. James Missionary Baptist Church. They discussed how they will continue the conversation within their own congregations and love one another as God loves them.
We had moments of issues of race for a while, but this is the moment where God, I think, is giving us an opportunity to grab a hold of grace, and I think a lot of it has to do with our ways and thoughts and how they're not in line with God's ways and thoughts.
If you're not willing to admit that there's structure, that there's fractures, there's brokenness, there's no hope of healing those things.
This is sometimes a difficult conversation for us. There are feelings of shame and guilt. There's a lot of processing for us. And so just the kindness and mercy of that kind of thing. And then we need to learn from you guys.
The pastors hope their conversation brought unity and hope.
Trying to understand race and racism can be tough. And with the current climate and protests like this one in Fayetteville, it may feel like it's a lot to deal with. Therapist Shakira Eakin says when you feel like it's too much, it's important to talk it out with others. Having productive conversations brings healing, as well as knowing that you're not alone.
Listen to each other. You know, be aware of your stuff and where you're coming from. Like, what do you get upset about? What offends you? Be aware of that. That's huge. Being able to listen to each other and say, okay, that was your experience. I respect that. Even if we don't agree, like, it's okay to not agree. Our world is diverse for a reason. But just being able to listen.
Eakins also says that you should decompress and stay positive. Allow yourself to feel. A lot of times you may just want to bottle up your emotions, but she recommends giving yourself time to understand why you feel the way you do. So do something that makes you happy and puts your mind at ease. Try taking a walk or doing some yoga. Anything that can help you focus on the present moment.
The importance of an uncomfortable conversation.
I don't think you're going to be able to fix that if you don't have those conversations.
Wyvids counselor believes you can't stay silent. Sometimes it seems easier to avoid the conversation rather than face it. One counselor says we can heal once we start talking, despite how uncomfortable it may be.
Well, racism is a very painful subject, and it brings up things, different things for different people. I think it's important just so that we can, understand how our world works. And when you understand how the world works, not only for you, but for other people, I think it lends to being able to show that compassion and that empathy for people.
And even though this is not a new conversation for America,
more people are, I guess their eyes have been opened and they're more willing to see, okay, I see this is happening in Minneapolis. In what other ways is this happening to people, even, to the people around me?
Counselor Erica Walter believes when we're silent, it only keeps us divided. We've heard concerns at recent protests.
We also want to hold our leadership accountable, stand with us, be a part of this movement.
Coming up, leaders in our community joining us for discussion about how we can move forward.
Welcome back. Throughout the special, we've shown you how neighbors are having uncomfortable conversations. Now we tackle how to move forward. For many of us, the same question keeps popping up. Where do we go from here? Well, to tackle that question, we have some community leaders from right here in our area and some critical thinkers. I'd like to welcome Dr. Alicia Smith, the Executive Director of the Ideals Institute at the University of Arkansas. We also have DeAndre Jones, a community activist, and Washington County Sheriff Tim Helder. Sheriff Helder is also part of the governor's task force for law enforcement. We want to welcome each of you and thank you for joining us. DeAndre, I want to begin with you. Recently we have seen so many calls to actions, from protests to petitions, memorials, so many calls to action. But what can we do that will bring meaningful change to our society, within our communities?
We must continue to be intentional and deliberate as it relates to providing awareness on racism. And as you mentioned earlier, it is a crucial conversation, but it is a conversation that we must have, and we must have an open heart and an open mind and be transparent. And I do believe that it is up to individuals. I think that one of the things that, and when I say individuals, in our city, it is up to our government to make sure that they are part of the conversation. Because what we're noticing is with the protest many times, they're based on policies that have proven to be problematic, policies that are no doubt have proven to be racist toward minorities. And so I think that with the conversations will definitely lead to policy change. And I believe that that's what we're doing here in Fayetteville. And one of the things that we're doing with the African American Advisory Council, we're working with Mayor Jordan and the City Council, and we are hoping that we're able to adopt that racism is a public health issue. And we believe that that will bring awareness, and that will identify systemic racism.
Dr. Smith, this is something that you deal very closely with at the Ideals Institute. What can we do to bring that meaningful change that we want to see?
There's not a one quick fix. There's not one specific recipe, but it does start with the personal, the interpersonal, the institutional, and the systemic. So you've got to kind of work at all of those levels simultaneously, which means that it takes all of us. And so everybody has a role. So as it relates to personal, as DeAndre said, you've got to get educated. You've got to understand the issues, got to understand someone else's perspective, and understand that we are not a monolith here in this country. Everybody has a different story, and everyone has a story that's valuable. So we need to understand that. Once you get educated, there needs to be a personal commitment to understanding how we got here. So understanding our history, understanding how the systems that we have lived with for centuries have gotten us to this very point, and then understanding how they have impacted our implicit biases and our behaviors and our language and how we live and breathe and have meaning here in this country. And then that goes into our interpersonals, being accountable for how we treat each other, how we engage each other, and what that means, not necessarily our intent, but the impact that our actions and our words have.
I want to turn now to Sheriff Helder. You are part of the governor's task force.
I think a lot of hard questions are being asked, which they need to be asked, and we need to have those conversations. But I think that as we move forward with the task force, what you're going to see are some greater efforts being made to decertification of bad officers, not just for ethical violations, but more for the brutality and use of force and anything related with racial issues that are not appropriate. And I think that we've missed the boat on some of these. And within our system, we've always had a great ability to decertify, but it's kind of hard to explain in a nutshell for you. But a lot of times, police administrators have allowed bad officers to resign in lieu of termination. Well, in doing that, then we miss the step of decertification, and a bad officer will then go to another organization and continue that bad behavior.
We have the full discussion posted on our website, 4029tv.com.
We also want to hear from you. You can send us an email at projectcommunity@4029tv.com. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope you all have a good night.